biological sex is simply male or female? But what if I told you the world is far more complex? Today, we'll explore why the familiar binary model of sex is an oversimplification that doesn't reflect reality. From chromosomes and hormones to primary and secondary sex characteristics, there are hundreds of possible combinations, and none of them always fit neatly into standard categories. Ready to look at biological sex from a new perspective and discover how many shades of male and female exist in the people around us? Then stay with us.
You know, when you're just talking about your day, it's automatic. You don't really think twice before you categorize someone you saw. You might say something like, a very strange woman was staring at the menu, or an interesting man gave me directions.
And look, for 99% of daily conversation, that's fine. It's functional shorthand.
Yeah.
It's only when you try to move past that, beyond just casual storytelling and really understand the biology, that's where the simplicity just falls apart.
Exactly. And for those of us who are really driven by that curiosity, who want to see the world as accurately as possible, we have to challenge that simple binary idea. So today we are taking a deep dive into why defining biological sex is so much more complicated than that two-box model we all got in high school. We're jumping right into the anatomy.
Our mission today is really to show you why those standard definitions of male and female are, they're often incomplete. Sometimes even misleading when you really look at the physiology. Biological sex, at its core, it's a mix, a composite of anatomical and physiological traits. It's not one thing. To really get it, you have to look at four separate, pretty complex components.
Four separate components. And the old model says they have to align perfectly for it to work.
Yeah.
So what are these four pillars?
Okay, so we start with the obvious one. Primary sexual characteristics.
Right.
These are the internal and external reproductive organs. So testes, ovaries, penis, vagina, uterus, all that.
Got it.
Second, you have the secondary sexual characteristics. These are the things that develop later, usually in puberty, and they're the common visual cues we use.
The things we think we can rely on when we just look at someone.
Exactly. Facial hair, the timbre and texture of the voice, how fat is distributed on the body, that shoulder-to-hip ratio, and the prominence of the Adam's apple.
Okay, so we have primary and secondary traits. What's number 3?
The third piece is the hormonal profile. So the specific balance and levels of key hormones like testosterone and estrogens that are circulating in the body.
And the last one, the most fundamental one.
And finally, pillar 4, the most foundational level, the chromosomal set. Typically what we think of as XX or XY.
So the common expectation is that all four of these things just line up perfectly. XY chromosomes mean you get male organs, high testosterone, and all the masculine secondary traits.
Right.
And XX means you get the opposite alignment for all four.
And that perfect four-way alignment.
Yeah.
That's the key misunderstanding.
Yeah.
That's the myth. If you actually look at the data, you find that the quote-unquote standard male and female are really just the two most common extremes.
Just 2 points on a much bigger map.
A huge map. Between those 2 points, there are a vast number of intermediate, combined, and atypical variants. Biological sex it's not black and white. It's a deep spectrum, defined by how those 4 separate pillars align, or, more often, how they misalign.
Okay, let's get into those mismatches, because this is where the human stories get really, really interesting. Let's start with the primary organs themselves. What happens when the plumbing doesn't match the expected set?
Well, we see some fascinating variations. And sometimes they're only discovered much, much later in life. For example, you can have individuals who have external female genitalia. They appear female.
To everyone their whole lives.
Their whole lives.
Yeah.
But internally, they don't have a uterus.
Yeah.
And they actually have male tests that just haven't descended into a scrotum.
We read about a case like that, a specific anecdote, and the discovery was just profound.
It was a married couple, and they were going through all these fertility investigations because they couldn't conceive. And it was only through these really deep clinical tests that they found out the woman, she actually had undescended tests instead of ovaries.
Wow.
Can you imagine the complexity of that? The shock, and just the fundamental shift in understanding for both people in that relationship. It just shows you how internal and complex these definitions can be, hiding right under the surface.
That really puts the clinical terms into a human context. So what about those secondary traits, the visual stuff we think we can rely on? You said they're highly unreliable.
Oh, absolutely. The secondary characteristics are they're really poor determinants of biological sex.
Right.
You can have people with female primary organs who have traditionally masculine secondary traits.
Like what?
Maybe they have a particularly low voice or a prominent Adam's apple or body and facial hair that would, typically be described as male.
And what about the reverse? People with male primary organs, but their appearance leans more feminine?
That's common too. We see masculine sex people who have very feminine fat distribution or narrow shoulders or a really high voice that you'd easily mistake for female over the phone. We even saw a note from someone in the source material who otherwise had perfectly standard male primary and secondary traits, but he had no visible Adam's apple. None.
So if you're just relying on that one visual cue, you're going to be wrong a lot of the time.
Frequently. It's a flawed identifier.
That makes total sense. Okay, let's shift to the third pillar, hormones. So the hormonal profile doesn't always line up with the organs or the appearance either, right?
Correct. Hormonal profiles are incredibly variable, often totally independent of the physical structures. You might find someone with a vagina and breasts who has naturally super elevated testosterone levels.
And the opposite.
Absolutely. A person with standard male organs might have significantly elevated estrogen levels.
There was that great story about a trans woman starting hormone therapy that really illustrated this.
Yes. She was getting ready to begin HRT to, facilitate the feminization process. But when they did the initial tests, they discovered her estrogen levels were already so high, naturally, that the medication was only going to be a minor adjustment.
Just a gentle correction.
A gentle correction, exactly. Not the massive hormonal shift you'd usually expect. Her body's chemistry was already operating way outside the expected binary range, even before any medical intervention.
Okay, so now let's go to the deepest level, the chromosomes. Even here at the Genetic Foundation, you're saying that the simple XXXY binary just completely breaks down.
It really does. A classic example of this is what's called the XY female. So you have a combination of female genitalia with a male chromosomal set.
How does that happen?
It's rooted in developmental biology. The crucial thing to remember is that the human body generally starts forming along the female type in the womb.
So the female pathway is the biological default. It's the starting point.
Exactly. The Y chromosome contains the genetic switch. It's called the SRY gene, and its job is to launch the male formation process. But if that Y chromosome fails to kickstart that pathway,
for whatever reason,
for any number of reasons, sensitivity issues, a malfunction, the individual just keeps developing along that default female pathway. The result is a person born with female organs, but who have the XY genetic set.
which is such a beautiful explanation for that old trivia question. Why do men have nipples?
Precisely.
They're a remnant, left over from that initial default female developmental pathway before the Y chromosome kicked in and changed things.
Exactly. But the complexity doesn't even stop there with a simple XXXY swap. We see a whole variety of atypical chromosomal sets that just defy easy categorization.
Let's run through that list, but
Yeah.
let's make it sound less like a textbook and more like the genuinely surprising variations they are.
Well, for a start, you find sets with extra copies of the sex chromosomes. So instead of just XX or XY, you might find individuals with XYY or even 3, 4, or 5 X chromosomes.
So XXXXXXXX.
Right. And conversely, you might find sets that are missing a chromosome, like XE, where there's only one sex chromosome present at all.
And then there's the really rare one, chimerism.
Yeah, chimerism is.
Mm-hmm.
It's arguably the most complex variation. It means a single person has more than one chromosomal set at the same time.
So they have different DNA in different parts of their body.
That's right. They might have both XX cells and XY cells distributed throughout their body, meaning they are genetically both male and female simultaneously, depending on which tissue you take a sample from.
That just raises a massive question. If we're using that traditional definition of biological sex, the one that insists on this neat alignment of everything, how on earth do you categorize people with these chromosomal combinations?
You can't. You can't fit them neatly into the standard male or female boxes.
Mm-hmm.
The definitions rely on perfect alignment, but reality is just. It's a constant, complex misalignment. These individuals fall completely outside those two familiar categories,
Yeah.
which just proves the binary model is inadequate for describing human diversity.
So, okay, what's the big takeaway here for someone listening? The deeper we go into this, the clearer it is that those old, rigid definitions we grew up with they're just not sufficient for reality.
The main takeaway is that biological sex exists along a true continuum. It's not just two extremes. It's every intermediate and combined form that results from the interplay of those four separate complex characteristics. And understanding this is really critical for moving beyond simple labels and actually seeing the vast, accurate complexity of the world around you.
It's a huge lesson in humility, really, about what we think we know just by looking at someone. And what's so fascinating is that this entire deep dive, we only covered the biological, the anatomical, and the physiological parts.
The very complexity of biological sex just opens the door to so much more.
Right. Because we haven't even touched on the topic of gender, a whole other field of inquiry. And that's a topic for you to continue exploring now that you have a clearer understanding of the biological spectrum.
As we can see, biological sex is not just male or female. There are countless combinations of organs, hormones, and chromosomes, which means the world is far more complex than it seems at first glance. You can find the full text of the article via the link in the description of this video. If you enjoyed the episode, subscribe to the channel, hit the like button, and share this video with your friends. Let's expand our understanding of the world together.